I open a Jane Austen novel, I am transported into an idyllic time and place. I am so mesmerized by her stories that at times I wish I could just jump into the book and live and breathe as one of the main characters. While there are many books and authors over the years that have had me enthralled with a story, I just assume continue on with my own life after I'm done reading it. But with Jane Austen's books, this isn't the case. Who is this woman who paints such incredible stories and characters that I wish I had an escape route directly into their world? For starters, Jane Austen lived and wrote during the turn of 18th century England, during a time of castles in the country, townhomes in London, high society, and strict conventions about class systems and who should be associating with who. But it's Austen's realism and biting social commentary that allows me to truly identify with her characters while learning a little something about myself along the way. Her characters are timeless and tackle the same social issues that are still relevant today. Jane Austen is the only novelist before Charles Dickens who still has a significant popular readership. She was born into the rural professional middle class. Her father was a country clergyman, while her mother was from a higher social rank, allowing the family to mingle with both the upper class and with local families. Through familial connections, the family was also somewhat linked with the larger world of fashionable society and politics, giving Austen a solid background from which to spin her tales. Austen grew up in an environment of open learning, creativity, and dialogue. She was privileged enough to attend a boarding school with her sister, which provided her with an education for girls typical of her time, and consisted of learning a foreign language, mostly French, music, and dancing. The rest of her education was made up of what she learned from her father and university-educated brothers, as well as what she could learn from her own reading out of her father's extensive library. It was also quite common for her family to put on productions from existing plays or to write their own stories and then act them out. Observation, improvisation, and acting all nurtured the development of her ultimate talent as a writer. After boarding school, Jane Austen returned home permanently and began writing her first novel, which became known as Pride and Prejudice. It was completed around the year 1799, when Austen was just 24 years old. This book is my favorite of Austen's 6 novels. It's a piece of romantic literature engulfed by the picturesque English countryside, featuring the middle-class character Elizabeth Bennet, who rebels against a very hierarchical society intent on ostracizing women who step out of the social norms required of the day. Austen satirizes the upper class's desire to treat those from the middle class as such, and creates the strong character of Elizabeth, who uses her emboldened personality in the story to ultimately beat the odds of marrying for love into the upper class. During Austen's day, a large amount of girls' and women's time was spent on sewing or needlework, hardly writing novels. Women were thought to only require training for domestic roles. In Austen's books, readers catch a glimpse of the ridiculousness of this thinking. Austen was absolutely tuned in to one of the most controversial ideas of her time, women's role in society. She was very aware of marriage as an economic institution and believed that women are rational creatures that must learn to think for themselves to fulfill their potential as human beings. Austen's stories are about the reality of women's lives during the 18th century and how her characters used their heads and developed critical thinking skills in order to navigate through the difficulties of their time period. She was able to portray her heroines as maintaining the public appearance of propriety while privately evaluating and undertaking the true nature of the situation. Contrary to the endings in her books, Jane Austen never married, but came close a couple of times. She was separated from her first love by her family due to the fact that he had nothing to offer financially, and she ended another engagement because she knew in her heart that it was based on economics rather than love. One of her characters commented that happiness is a matter of chance, while marriage provides a state of security. Perhaps Austen was onto something. After several attempts at publishing over the years, Austen's first novel to be printed was Sense and Sensibility in 1811. Pride and Prejudice was finally published in 1813, which was 14 years after it had been written. A total of 4 novels were published during her lifetime. In 1917, Austen died at the age of 41.